Mr. President, I rise to speak in support of an amendment that I look forward to advancing as a member of the relevant Appropriations Subcommittee, in fact, the ranking Democrat. I was pleased to have the opportunity to work in a bipartisan way to secure $380 million in the last fiscal year that's been distributed to the states to secure our elections. And as you may have heard from some who opposed this in the Appropriations Committee when we took it up and debated it, they ask a few simple questions I will try to address quickly. Aren't elections a state and local responsibility? Why should the federal government be providing funding for states and localities to secure their elections? That's true. Elections are overwhelmingly run at the state and local level, and the costs of securing and modernizing our voting machines and our voting systems will be overwhelmingly borne at the state and local level. Second, this $380 million, it was just made available, and I don't think it's even gone out yet. Have they used it well? Have they used it properly? And third, why is this something we need to do now? Is there any indication that our upcoming elections are actually at threat? Let me briefly speak to those three. This morning, it was publicly reported that the United States Department of Homeland Security, outside a classified setting for the first time, revealed that not one, not two, not a dozen, but more than 100 American power utilities had been successfully hacked by Russian military intelligence, and that air-gapped control rooms, meaning control rooms that are designed so they're not connected to the internet, in power generating or distributing utilities around the country had been compromised by Russia. A level of sophistication at their invasion and interference in our physical infrastructure that's matched by their sophistication in interfering in and intruding in our election infrastructure. So I think the present danger is very clear and very real, and as my colleagues have stated at great length, our current Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, a former colleague, has said recently and repeatedly that our election infrastructure is at risk. On July 13th, Special Counsel Mueller indicted 12 Russian military intelligence officials for cyber attacks on our 2016 election, and we know those attacks are coming again. Michael Chertoff, who's the former Bush Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and Grover Norquist, long known as an advocate for reduced federal spending, jointly wrote an editorial earlier this year, I think it was in the Washington Post, where they said, and I quote, "We can replace all paperless voting machines in the country for less than the cost of an F-22 fighter jet." As Senator Klobuchar has said repeatedly and correctly, election security is national security. And Chertoff and Norquist concluded with this thought: it is not practical to expect state and local election administrators in, say, rural Missouri or small-town Maine, I'll add in my state of Delaware, or in my colleague's state of Iowa, to go toe-to-toe with the premier government-backed cyber mercenaries of Russia or China or North Korea. Just as federal agencies prudently provide support for state law enforcement in dealing with terrorism, federal officials should give guidance and support with the election cybersecurity threat. My home state of Delaware is one of 5 with no paper trail for our election systems, and our election systems are air-gapped. I've just received a letter from our state election commissioner, Elaine Manlove, that makes clear that with the $3 million already distributed through the money made available last year, they will begin to make a down payment on replacing our current antiquated election machinery with those that will have a verifiable paper trail. I have many more examples I could cite, but I will be brief because I have a colleague who's waited long for his opportunity to speak. All states have now requested the funding. 90% of the funding has been dispersed. The EIC is working with states to make sure that they are addressing cybersecurity issues and, in particular, replacing outdated and antiquated systems. I'll give you one of many examples. In the state of Louisiana, they last purchased voting equipment in 2005. Their 10,000 voting machines are antiquated, with spare parts dwindling and no longer manufactured. The Secretary of State of Louisiana estimated the replacement cost would be between $40 and $60 million. A $3 million down payment of federal money is just barely enough to get them started, not enough to complete the job. Let me close by saying this. Election security is not a partisan issue. It's about protecting who we are as a nation. Free and fair and regular elections define us as a democracy. Democrats, Republicans, and independents, all Americans who want to know that their votes are counted and our elections are free and fair should care about a federal role in supporting states and localities as they work to ensure that our election systems are protected and our equipment can't be compromised. Folks, this is an issue, not just for the November 2018 elections, but for the 2020 elections. The amendment we hope to call up later today should not be controversial. This is about protecting our democracy. Thank you, Mr. President, and with that, I yield the floor.